Hi, Marino. It's good to have you here with us. It's such an honor. I heard many times your testimony and many of your talks on YouTube, and it has been so much inspiring for me and for many people. I wanted you to share, if you can, with us your testimony. It would be really great.
Yes, I thank you for inviting me, and also it is great for me to be in touch again with Lebanon through you. I hold your country dearly in my heart, all the Catholics there, and all the people there of all walks of life. Um, and I hope I go back to see you again one day, presentially there. Yes, I'd be more than happy to share my mystical experience with God in a short uh, version, because I can spend hours just relating this message. So the whole story begins in Colombia, is where I am right now. And I was born in a small coffee growers town in the Andes Mountains, in a Catholic family. I was there until age 14. And then they sent me to the capital of Bogota, where I am now. Here is where I have my mother mission's house. And I was sent here when I was 14, and those were the 1960s. The 1960s brought about a revolution, especially to the youth, to my generation. And we had many American hippies in Colombia. They were draft dodgers, as they called them, because they were running away from the Vietnam War. But they brought with them the hallucinating drugs, the rock and roll, the Orientalism, all these pagan Oriental religions like Hinduism, all the isms, and they brought that with them, the divinations, the tarot card readings, the astrologies and numerologies, something that wasn't known in Colombia much, only by a few people, but it wasn't a culture in Colombia as it was in the US already among the youth. So when I came from my hometown as a provincial boy, I ran into these people, and very soon I was taken by that culture, because also they were so much into all kinds of free love, which translates into promiscuity, really. And so as a youth, and even though I was Catholic, still my rebellious spirit identified with those people. And very soon I walked away from the Catholic faith and was drowned into this dark dimension that looked so bright to me, so deceiving. And I got married when I was like 20 years old and moved to Germany, to the city of Hamburg. There in Germany, my two sons were born, and also I became an actor and a musical composer at the University of Hamburg. And after 7 years, I moved to California, to Los Angeles, and got engaged for many years, over 20 years, in the entertainment industry, acting, music, screenplay writing, many, many things. And I continue on living a hedonistic life, focus on money, pleasure, fame, life in the fast lane, as they call it. And nothing with God. Everything was magical, new age. And in year 97, everything changed. I came to Colombia to visit during Christmas. And that Christmas of 97 was very sad in my family, because within 4 years prior to that Christmas, we had lost 5 people in my family, one after another. First, my wife died to cancer. A few months later, my younger brother died in an accident in the Caribbean Sea, and we never recouped his body. He disappeared in the water. And then my father passed away. A few months later, another brother of mine committed suicide in Colombia. And not long after that, my mother passed away. So that Christmas was pretty sad Christmas. We were 4 sisters and me left. My sisters were practicing Catholics, and they didn't know that I didn't practice my Catholic faith anymore because I left my country when I was very young and never really came back. I came back a few times for short periods, and we never had a conversation about the faith. But this time, my sister invited me to go to church to pray the Divine Infant's Christmas Novena. This is a very old Catholic tradition in Colombia. Begins on the 16th of December and ends at midnight mass of the 24th of December. And I went to church just to please my sisters, but it had been 33 years since I didn't walk into a Catholic church. So I went to church and the priest introduced the novena saying, he who prays the novena with devotion and faith, the baby Jesus will grant him grace. To me, the word grace was not known. I didn't know what it meant, but it sounded to me like luck because I was a worldly person. And I said to myself, maybe I can get something out of this. But I didn't know I was talking to God. And I asked the baby Jesus as an intention of that novena to change my life. But the change of life I wanted, obviously, was something worldly, nothing to do with the salvation of my soul. That wasn't in me. But God changed my life that Christmas his way. Though it was a very painful experience, if I look at it with the eyes I have today, I wouldn't change it for the world. So on the 25th of December, that is the day after I prayed the novena, after I finished, driving into a coffee ranch plantation of one of my uncles in my hometown. And as I crossed the gate of the ranch, 6 guys jumped out of the woods with machine guns and kidnapped me. And I fell in the hands of the FARC rebels of Colombia, some criminals, narco-terrorists. And they took me prisoner to the jungle. And they kidnapped me for a ransom, for money. So altogether, I was 6 months kidnapped in the jungle. But the first 15 days were in a cave. In that cave, they kept me tied up and with a hood over my head. And they will feed me once a day. They will pull me out of the cave, set me, go to the bathroom in the woods, and give me something to eat. And then put me back in the cave. For 15 days was like that. On the 15th day exactly, they came and told me I was to give them a pretty large ransom. And they said if I refused to give it to them, they will kill my family. Also, they told me that they were going to execute me at the end after I finished paying. So they sentenced me to death. They tied me up again, put the hood back on my head, and threw me back in the cave. They told me the next day they were going to transfer me somewhere else. So that night was a very, very difficult night because my life was over as I knew it. There was no hope I could make it alive out of that kidnapping, and my sisters were killed. All the money I ever made was going to be stolen by them. So I was a mess. I was in really bad shape. And all of a sudden, though I was awake and only that I was tied up and covered up my head, I entered into an ecstasy. And I found myself in the inside patio of the house where I was born in my hometown. I was on a tricycle with a stick in my hand, going really hitting the plants and the flowers. I was in shock. I couldn't get off the ecstasy, and I was sure I was dying because I couldn't figure out what was happening. That was way too mysterious. I was 47 years old that night, and I continue on reliving my life. When I say I am reliving my life, it's not like I was watching my life in a video. I was actually there at age 3 on that tricycle, but I was with a mind of 47 years of age, which made everything so mysterious and difficult. And I continue on doing that, reliving my life. By the time I was going through age like 11, I began to go through the most excruciating pain, a pain that wasn't physical. This was a spiritual pain. It was the pain of my conscience. As you know, when we live in mortal sin, we conveniently close down our conscience. We put it to sleep. And we lose the fear of God. So now my conscience began to wake up and the fear of God came back. So as I grew older in the experience, the pain was deeper because the sins were more serious, more grave. And so if I wouldn't have been in an ecstasy, I would have died of pain just by going through my sins with a perfect conscience, because that's what it means to have an illumination of conscience. It's something way beyond our capacity to bear something so strong. And I went through my whole life. This part, we can call it, no doubt, an illumination of conscience. And then something more mysterious happened. I appeared face down against the grass in what appeared to be a pretty high mountain. And in the midst of the most incredible silence, I can only call it a perfect silence. And I look up, and far away in the distance, I could see another mountain, even higher. And the top of the mountain was covered with fog. And very slowly, that fog began to fade away. It was also like so mysterious. I was in awe all the time, because that's what an ecstasy means. You are in awe. It's like breathless. You feel like that. And I'm taken by this in a way that I couldn't even explain. And once all that fog was gone, on the top of the mountain appeared the most incredible city of light. Though I was so far away, I could perfectly see it and understand it. But no matter how much, I have never been able to explain it in words, what I saw and what I understood of the city of light. One thing I knew, my soul knew, I had to have been there and didn't make it. So that troubled my heart deeply. And I was looking to see how I can get there. And I noticed that the two mountains were not connected. So there was no way I could go there. And that troubled me even more. But then I began to hear the sound of like big waters, almost like a tsunami, but I couldn't see it, only the sound. And then it turned into a sound like of many, many millions of voices. And then it turned into a single voice. And though I had been so far away from God all my life, the moment I heard that voice, I knew it was God's voice. And I was really devastated. I wanted to disappear, to disintegrate. That voice was the biggest ever love I ever heard and felt. And I knew who I was. It was all a plan of God, but I didn't know. And the first part that I called the illumination of conscience gave me the knowledge of the state of my soul, the sinful state of my soul. So when God spoke to me, I knew who I was, and I was filled with shame, and I couldn't bear with that love. But He held me there, and didn't let me sink in my misery. He held me, and He spoke to me at length. If I were to live 100 more years, I wouldn't be able to cover not even the minimum of what He said. He spoke to me about humanity from beginning to end. He spoke to me about Judaism and how they were my elderly brothers and all the struggles, battles, trials they went through as a preparation or a molding of God, of those people, for the incarnation of the Messiah. And then He spoke about the new creation and the new covenant with Jesus Christ. And He said, I was called to be a member of His army. That's how He called it. From the womb of my mother, He chose me, but I had deserted it. And that was so painful to hear. He never accused me because He didn't act as a judge. He was acting as love, real love. And that hurts much more than a judge. It was so painful, that perfect love, because I knew what I had. Then He spoke to me about the church, and He said, the Catholic Church is my church. And that is something that has sounded in my head ever since. When I see a church, I know that is the church of God, and that means a lot to me. And He said, but salvation is for every human being. He said, we as Catholics are Eucharistic instruments of reparation, and we are responsible for the salvation of all humankind. And that sounded really big. And so He said He enlisted me in His militia. After that, He spoke to me about the sacraments, each one of them, especially the sacrament of confession and the Eucharist. And then I appeared in a lake with the water up to my waist. And in front of the lake, there was a big rock, beautiful, like old gold. And on top of the rock on the right side, I could see the head of a man. At first, I didn't know who that man was. So I looked towards the water where I was, and I could see like a floating mist or fog, really thick, but floating. And as I looked at it closely, I realized it wasn't a mist or a fog. It was thousands of spirits of evil. And they were all the spirits of my sins, mortal sins of 33 years. And I knew they were like bundles, because I'm talking about an ethereal realm. This is not a physical realm. Even though I'm mentioning water, a rock, a man, but it still was all ethereal. And when I looked at one of these spirits that were there like bundles, like slime, I noticed exactly which sin that was, and I knew that sin was in me too. And those were like my partners, you know, something horrible. I was devastated and I had no hope because I was drowned into that realm of the spirits of evil that had me in chains for so many years, 33 years. When I looked towards the left of the lake, I could see that the cloud of spirits was going down towards an abyss. And I was able to look at the abyss. And I could see how deep down my soul had already gone through my sinful life. If I would have died that night, I would have been condemned. And I knew, I saw where I would have ended up. It was horrifying. I felt trapped. I looked towards the right of the lake and I could see and experience for a while purgatory on the right side. Then I look up towards the rock looking for the light, because the only light I could see there was that man that was on top of the rock. There was no other light. Everything was dark. And I realized that the man that was up there was my guardian angel. And he was the one that had been teaching me all about all this demonology involved in my life, about hell, about the purgatory. And he took me to my hometown at age 11, and I appeared playing the trumpet of my school band behind a statue of Our Lady that 4 schoolmates of mine were carrying in a procession. And I kept playing the trumpet behind the statue. Later on, the statue humanized and Our Lady appeared walking with 2 children, one from each hand. And I kept playing the trumpet behind her. After a while, the angel was teaching to me that my mother had consecrated me in her womb to Our Lady, and Our Lady had been always with me. That was a beautiful sight of mercy and the love of Mother, Celestial Mother, and also the teaching about the Rosary during that procession, the power of the Rosary, the power of processions, how that procession was exorcising the town, and so many good things were happening during the procession. I had been 3 years a trumpet player for the school band, and I play in many processions and feasts of the church. So the angels show me what he called the soul's economy, which meant God took the 3 years that I played trumpet in the church as a shield to protect me from the evil one during all those years I was in sin. They didn't last to cover me the whole time, but they last for the protection of many big dangers. But what he was showing to me was God's mercy. If we only knew how merciful God is, how he uses the smallest good things we do to protect us from the gigantic dangers that come along from Satan to destroy us. And I came back into the lake, and the rock was filled with light. And I knew that light was Jesus, and I knew I couldn't look at the light because I was standing in that water in the lake in the midst of all the darkness of my sins, surrounded by evil spirits. So I couldn't bear the light. I looked down towards the water, escaping the light, and I could see from the corner of my eye, there was a presence on the right side of the rock, high above. And I looked up, and it was Our Lady again. And I felt I was connected to her through an umbilical spiritual cord. And everything that was flowing out of my heart towards Our Lady, my anguish, my fear, all this devastation and shame was going through her into the light that was Jesus. And that continued on going for a while, like in a circle. And after a while, I was lifted up. My head was lifted up towards the light. It was a strong force that pulled me up. And there was nothing I could do. My head down again. I was facing the light. I was blinded by the light. But little by little, I began to see the silhouette of Jesus in the light. And I could see how there was a big intercession of Our Lady towards our Lord, and how he was rescuing me from the darkness. And that happened for a while. I could spend a long time just in that part. Every part I just mentioned is like windows that if I open them, I can spend hours in each one of them. I came off the ecstasies and I knew something really big had happened to me, but it wasn't in my memory, but I knew it was somewhere inside me. And I spent 5.5 months more kidnapped in the jungle after my spiritual experience, my mystical experience. Now I wasn't afraid of getting killed by the rebels anymore. I was afraid of being condemned. So my biggest supplication to God was to let me confess before I die. But I knew I was sentenced to death, and that was going to take a miracle. So 6 months to the date I was kidnapped, they took me to a road at night and set me free with no explanation. That is what I can call a miracle, a huge miracle, because I knew those guys never understood why they set me free. That night was so supernatural. I knew the Holy Spirit took over those people, and that's how I ended up on a road in the jungle at night, free. And after a while, after a long walk, I was picked up by a bus, taken back to civilization. As soon as I recuperate a little, I went to confession at a Franciscan monastery. To me, being set free from the rebels was important, but my most important freedom was coming up. It was my confession. I wanted to be free from Satan, and God gave me that grace. So that day, my confession was very long, but the biggest gift ever. When I walked away from that confessionary, I felt I was floating like a floating feather in the air, and my new life began. I went back to California, to my home in Los Angeles, and began a new life. I spent 2 years in silence. I never shared with anybody my mystical experience. I didn't even know how to do it, but I began to be a Catholic again. I was madly in love with the church, still am. And I remember every time I walk into a Catholic church, the words of God, the Catholic Church is my church. That stayed like tattooed in my heart. And 2 years later, I came back to Colombia, and during midnight, a noon mass at a big church in Bogota, I had another ecstasy with the Lord, and where he revealed to me the mission he was calling me to fulfill. He said I was born for this mission. My mission was just going to start. I was 49 years old. I was the broken instrument because I was devastated by the kidnapping. I was afraid of people, afraid of the world, afraid of sin. I was a mess. And I didn't understand why God would have chosen me, being such a broken man, to do such a big mission. But I went looking for the Franciscan, where I went the first time to confession after my kidnapping, and he served as my guide to walk into this new life. And he became my spiritual father since then. And I left my artistic life and became a lay Catholic missionary 22 years ago. My mission was revealed by the Lord as the Pilgrims of Love. And this is what I have been doing throughout the world, throughout all the continents, over 120 countries I have visited, and this is who I am, in short.
It's incredible to hear all of this. Every time I hear your testimony, I learn something new, and it's so inspiring and so enriching spiritually. Thank you very much, Mr. Marino Restrepo. It was really so amazing to hear all of these things, and I hope to be able to talk to you again to do another interview maybe or something. Thank you very much.
Yes, by all means, thank you for inviting me. And let's try and visit Lebanon sometime in the future. That would be nice.
Yeah, we would love to have you here.
Yes, we make sure we do that.
Yeah,
So may God bless you. And thank you for inviting me again.
thank you. God bless you too.